Good afternoon, colleagues. My name is Charles Mwangi. I'm a biochemist by profession. I'm here representing my colleague, Betty Abera, who unfortunately was unable to travel from the US for this presentation. And my presentation will be quite short. It is to do with pharmacy and pharmacy-based immunization. We are trying to look at a delivery framework and a global experience from where PSI has had that exposure and see whether we can bring it to see whether we can benefit our own patients and for better outcomes. This is data-driven. Like the panelists were talking here, the importance of data, and we'll look at some of the data that has actually enabled us to try and put this forward. That number one is the fact that the retail pharmacy is actually the first point, like has been said here. The pharmacist is one of the person that is very much available when it comes to patients and their needs. At the community level, for example, a patient who seems to have a headache, they will first call to a pharmacy. And therefore, they will most likely interact with a pharmacy professional like yourselves. And therefore, we looked at and said, what can we do as an organization, PSI, to borrow what has been done in other markets? Can it be of benefit in this particular market as well? And allow me to also introduce Viya. Viya is a 100% commercial enterprise, 100% owned by PSI. As you are aware, PSI, being an NGO, is not able to do any commercial work because of the government regulation in terms of taxation. And therefore, they have come up with a brand that they are calling Viya Health that will be able to do such kind of programs that are commercial oriented. And therefore, in a nutshell, what framework would we be able to have? Next slide, kindly. What framework are we looking at? We have about 6 steps if on a pharmacy-based vaccine designed to implement any particular framework that we would look at. And the first, about 6 steps, the first is to assess the current state and the enabling environment. Is there an enabling environment, for example, in our own setup? Is a pharmacist allowed to give a vaccine? We are talking about self-care. The learnings that have been there, for example, from post-COVID, because this is actually so much driven from post-COVID. What is the current framework? Would it be enable you as a community pharmacist, for example, to give that yellow fever? And if you give that yellow fever, will the patient be allowed to pass through any exit point and enter into a country where that vaccine certification is required? Those are the kinds of questions you need to ask. And then the other one is the advocate for policy change. If there isn't that particular framework, what can be done in terms of changing then building capacity? This is where you as the association would really come in. In terms of the academia, most of them that are here, it would be very important to see, is there a framework or a curriculum that, for example, is taught from a pharmacy university, for example, a faculty at the university? Is there capacity? And for those that have already qualified and has not trained in vaccine, is there a process? And that's what we are going to look at, that it is possible to start from where we are. Then build public trust, very important, because it is very important for that patient to be interacting with at the pharmacy level. They come to you as your client, but they want to know, they know you are a pharmacist, you have never injected, but right now you start telling them, I can give you a vaccine. There has to be public buy-in. and that public trust becomes very important. How do we go about it? Then there has to be need for expanding environment as well as for access, and finally implement and generate evidence and for purposes of scale, because we would like to look at this as a pilot. So, next slide, kindly. So the first one is, like I said, a lot of learnings was from post-COVID. In COVID, for example, this is like a checklist. For example, the enabling legislation to allow pharmacists to vaccinate, is it in place? And we shall see the current position in Kenya. So we would look at the regulatory requirements and check that and see, is it in place or not in place? Then what requires to be done? Thank you. So that is phase one. Phase two, next slide. What kind of advocacy are we talking about? And what would entice you as a pharmacist to try and offer vaccination in your own pharmacy? Number one would be, how would the partnership between the public, the private partnerships, for example, when it comes to the other aspect is remuneration. How would you earn money for you to look at it and see it is possible? For example, we have private costs plus private costs where you buy the vaccine. You have a markup like you do with the normal, currently with the normal pharmaceutical products. Next slide. Number three, to build capacity, and this is where we are talking about the need to have a curriculum, the need for education for those pharmacists that are coming out, that are in colleges, and those that are already qualified like yourselves. One of the needs, you will see in other in the need for CPR, for example. When you offer it out, is there CPR? How is the reporting process? Because the government would want to capture this data. Next slide. And to build public trust, it will be very important. And you as a pharmacist, because already the client already has that trust with you, you are the first point of contact. And it becomes very easy to build that trust. How would that look like? From awareness all the way to uptake, advocacy, and then it becomes a vicious cycle as you improve the whole process. Next slide. Expanding an enabling environment. How is the practice? What are the regulatories, for example, that the regulator, Pharmacy and Poisons Board, would want to look at? To that, their input. What about patient care services and the quality of to improve on the quality, for example? Next slide. And these are just some of the examples. 15 vaccines most commonly administered at pharmacy levels. And first, next slide. I'll just give two examples here. Allow me to give an example of Australia. As recently as 2014, there was no framework. But as recent as January 2023, the number of COVID vaccines that are administered in 8 states, the impact that they had delivered on the community pharmacy. The US is the oldest. I'll give as the next example. 1996 is when they started, and today, like has been mentioned here, virtually every pharmacist qualifying in the US comes out as a qualified vaccinator. And the last, this is the current setup in Kenya. This is what needs to be interrogated as an association. As an organization, as PSI, we are more than willing to walk this journey with you as an association. The CPD accredited training for vaccination. Thank you very much.